Good morning, everybody, from Planning Skills, and we're here this morning to hear from Highland Council about the work that they've been doing over the past months in the Fort William area. My name is Irene Buteman, and I'm going to just talk you through what we're doing today and a little bit of an introduction to what we will be covering. With me in the room today is Trevor Moffat from the Improvement Service as well, and then sitting up in Inverness is Scott Dalgarno. So the structure for today is that, as you can see, I'll give a little bit of an introduction, particularly around what the actual place principle is, given that that's one of the kind of contexts for the presentation today. Then I'll hand over to Scott, who will share with you his presentation and talk through that on the work that they've been doing. And then we'll have a half-hour period after that for questions and answers. Now, how we will be doing that is while you're listening to the presentation, please feel free to be submitting in your questions. And I'll just hand over to Trevor, who will explain to everybody how to do that.
Hello, Trevor Moffat from the Improvement Service here. Yes, for all delegates wanted to ask questions at the end of after Scott's presentation, there should be a small dashboard on your screen. One of the options will be questions. Everyone's muted from the delegates, so if you just type in your questions there, I'll be reading these, and I will pass on the questions to Scott after his presentation. Any other problems during the chat as well, if you just put something up there, I'll be able to respond to you.
Okay, thanks very much. So just moving on then, for today, we have been titling this about applying the police principle, and I just want to give a little bit of context about what that police principle is and what's happening with it, so that really when you're listening to Scott's presentation on what they have been doing up in Fort William, you can be thinking through how there are some real key elements there of what they're already doing that are applying that work. The principle has been worked up with Scottish Government and COSLA, and to that end it's had full support last month during March from the Scottish Cabinet adopting it, and from the Environment and Economy Board of COSLA also adopting it and promoting it. It's not to say, as we'll see today, that place-based working hasn't already been happening across Scotland. It's simply going out there saying this should be happening more. So that blurb of words in front of you is really just to give you that context. I'm not going to run through it now, but with this presentation will be recorded and it'll be something for those of you to look back at. But the key elements there about place and people and location and resources coming together are the themes that will be coming through in the presentation as we move forward. So the actual ask around that principle is that everybody working in an area and providing services and looking after assets being land, buildings and people, need to work and plan together. And it's those principles that we're running through as well in the work that has been happening in Fort William. So what the principle asks is that everybody now takes a commitment, really, and there's a presumption in favour of the fact that we will work more collaboratively around places in order to have a clear way forward for services, for assets, investments that maximises the impact of all of us working in an area, including a community. So that's just giving you a little bit of context to the presentation, and what I'll do now is just pass over to Scott up in Inverness, and he'll take us through the work that they've been doing in Fort William.
Just transferring over to Scott just now.
Okay, thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you here fine in the office.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, morning everybody, and thanks very much for dialing in today. I hope it's of interest and relevance to your work to hear what we've been doing in Fort William in particular, and latterly how that relates to the place principle that Irene's just introduced. What I'm intending to cover this morning in about 20-25 minutes is, I'm hoping to change the slide. So what I'm hoping to run through with you today is, first of all, what we did in Fort William and what really the Fort William 2040 project is, what the drivers, the purpose of it was. Then want to run you through the consultation process we went through at the end of last year, and the particular outputs that came from that process. And then it'll be, what I'm hoping to then do is let you know a little bit about the new ways of working that have been initiated by this process and how that really cuts across, carries across to the principles of the place principle. So back to where it all started. The Fort William 2040 project really was initiated from a bit of work that coincided with the preparation of our West Plan, the West Highland and Islands Local Development Plan. That is the examination of that plan was actually underway July last year, but it was a little bit before that that we actually started thinking about what the plan meant for people. So what we started with in the plan itself were a set of statements that we were calling outcomes. So rather than having objectives for the plan, we had outcomes that expressed what we wanted to achieve for people and places in the area. And these 4 statements at the top in the coloured boxes reflected everything, the outcomes that we wanted to address or bring about from any development, any investment that was happening in the West Highland and Islands area. And in particular, for Fort William in particular, we identified so-called placemaking priorities at the bottom there, which were really about applying those outcomes to the place and thinking about what anything that happened in the area contributed towards. So any investment, any business, any planning application, any community planning decision should really in theory contribute to these outcomes. But alongside that, we were also mindful that there was a really significant change proposed in Fort William. The scale of change was, relatively speaking, very significant. Fort William is the second largest town, it's the largest town after Inverness in the Highlands. So, but the scale of change was potentially quite significant. Not only the prospect of significant employment growth, but the council has begun a large house building programme, an infrastructure programme, whereby there's new services, new public services being invested in the town. So the scale of change, relatively speaking, was very significant. And alongside that, there's been some long-standing calls for infrastructure improvements in the town, not least to address congestion issues, which are particularly pronounced in the summer period, tourism period. Alongside those background considerations, we were very conscious that our wish to start engaging with people around what this meant for the town could easily have been confused with a consultation about a new plan. And we were very clear that this was not about preparing a new plan, starting with a blank sheet of paper. This was about capitalising on the role of the delivery programme as a statutory requirement of councils to prepare, and really utilising that to collaborate with people around place. So moving on, the drivers for the Fort William 2040 piece of work itself, as I say, were founded in the local development plan, but it was really about trying to make sure that we had a mechanism by which you had, at the very least, the ability to communicate with people about change that was happening to their place. We were conscious that the LDP was very static in terms of expressing a set of land use changes at a point in time, but there was nothing really live to let people know what is the latest status, what is happening in my backyard, what is happening across the road here, who's delivering that, how much is it costing, when's it going to be finished. So at the very least, this was we wanted to try and find a means of sharing information about what was happening to a place where there was a significant change. We also wanted to try and make sure that there was better coordination amongst all of those people and all the multitude of different people and organisations doing things to and for a place. But as I say, we wanted to make sure that the communities were with us. What we were trying to produce was a joint mission statement, if you like, for the town. And we were attracted by the charrette way of working, which has now become a kind of staple part of our way of working in the public sector. But we were interested in applying that to the delivery side of things rather than simply creating a land use plan. So it was about trying to bring people on board, bring people with us, but then use that joint mission statement to help make the case for change and prioritisation and for funding. And at the bigger picture, it was about delivering the plan and thinking about what does that mean for the sense of place? What are the connections between all these different things that are likely to happen in the future to this place? So moving on to what we did, the starting point for the exercise, and it was interesting to hear Irene talk about assets there. We prepared this so-called development and assets map, which was based on the local development plan map for the area, but included what you see the local committee's priorities for the area, which were had a lot of crossover with what we were trying to do in the area, but they reflected the assets for the town, the things that we wanted to exploit and the projects that we wanted to see, that various people in the town wanted to see delivered. And the criteria, if you like, for the inclusion of projects on here was anything that was being actively pursued. That's not necessarily something that's been delivered, because there's question marks over some of this, of some of the projects here. Some of them won't happen. That won't necessarily be a sign of failure, but it's things that are being actively pursued in the town by different people. So that was the starting point for the process, and we began as part of our early engagement. We're very keen in Highland to engage with young people, and this was a place where there was no different. We wanted to make sure that young people had a chance to input on. We'd done some work with them on the local development plan on what they wanted to see, how they wanted to see their area change. But this is really about this moved that discussion on a little bit. And so we talked to schools about what it meant for them as a place, as you know, where they would live, where they might work, what it might mean, what the place might feel and look like in the future. And that was a really good starting point for the discussions which were held later on in the year. And it was the start of the series, a series of consultation events. The main consultation event that you see here happened in September, and we have to give particular thanks and mention to Highlands and Islands Enterprise and Scottish Government, who worked with us on a kind of joint arrangement in making this main event a success. We got well over 120 people attending in the course of what was a single day session. And the real purpose of that session, and the right-hand side of that slide looks a little bit confusing, but there is some logic in that, would you believe? And the purpose of that exercise was really about checking all of those assets and projects that are there for improvement or for delivery, and checking that they were actually helping to achieve the outcomes in those placemaking principles. So it was about trying to ensure that each individual thing happened, how it happened, who was responsible, what the costs were, but more to the point, it was about making connections between all of these things and thinking about the added value that it delivered. And what I'll do now is just show you a glimpse of, just a 2-minute glimpse of what the event looked like. I'm led to believe that there's a problem with the audio on this video, but hopefully just seeing the subtitled video is a useful insight to what happened on the day. Sorry folks, I'll give it a second, but if it doesn't kick in. Apologies for that. That wasn't the smoothest of videos, but hopefully that's just giving you a slight insight to what happened on the day. I think the true success of what was happened here will take a few years for us to kind of realise how things are going. But in the immediate aftermath of the event, alongside what was quite welcoming actually, some fairly positive articles that we got on the back of the event. But the small column on the right-hand side there was for me a small sign of success, because we did want to try and carry out an event that was about enabling and delivering, and it wasn't about planning. So we very carefully avoided any mention of the P word, and that's something that we got that was mentioned to us in the feedback, was that it was good to think about the place and not planning. So changing the P word. So after further consultation that we carried out after that main consultation day, we ended up publishing, after a long period of consultation and agreement with our elected members. This week we've published the Fort William 2040 report, and I'll soon, in a few minutes, I'll give you an introduction to what what it looks like online. That's certainly the best way to see how it works. But the content of the report there's really three main elements in terms of the content of the report itself. And they are the vision, the master plan, and the delivery program that you see there in the tabs. So the vision, first of all, it has three elements. And as you saw in the video there, connectivity and transport is a massive problem, but also a real an issue that really needs to be addressed in the town, and is a main concern of communities and for elected members. So that came across really strongly as one of the themes for the vision for the area. Second was about the water as really a focus for regeneration and investment, both for commercial tourism, but also for just local people as well. It was seen as an underutilised asset. Not just the loch that's shown there. This is actually an older version of that drawing. It was also about the river and the canal as real opportunities for investment. And the third one was about a great place to live. People feeling that a great place to visit at the moment, but perhaps the experience for visitors for residents isn't quite as good as it should be. And with the call for further employment opportunities and more, and to bring people into the town, we wanted to make sure that that it was seen as a really great place to live. So those are the three vision drawings that make up the overall vision for the Fort William 2040 report. Alongside that, we updated the 2040 master plan, which represents, as I say, the projects that are under active consideration. Now this goes hand in hand with the delivery programme that is perhaps the main element of the Fort William 2040 report. These are the two elements that will be updated on an ongoing basis. And because, so that the projects that are listed in the delivery programme will then correlate with the projects that are shown on the 2040 master plan. So it's a live, evolving tool to support the delivery of all of these different things that are contributing to the wider vision. The monitoring that's going to be carried out will be directly attributed to the delivery programme for the local development plan, but except we won't necessarily talk to people about that too much. That's just an in-house approach for us. But because it's a statutory requirement, we think it's best to exploit that opportunity. The actions themselves could relate to fundraising, studies, feasibility and delivery, and there's a number of things that we'll be checking on an ongoing basis. So before I give you the demo of the website, the monitoring is likely to involve how those projects fit with the wider vision, those three elements of the vision, but it's also about checking how the delivery of the LDP outcomes are being, and the placemaking priorities are being implemented by those individual projects. So on an annual basis, at the very least, we'll be working with the communities and with all the different people who are leading the projects that are in the delivery programme to check what their update is, how their progress is getting on with, how they're progressing and delivering individual projects, how that at the bigger picture, how that is delivering the vision. Are we on track? And also, do we need to think about the promotion or perhaps removal of any of the projects? Have things been delivered? Are things perhaps unlikely to be delivered and therefore have to be removed? Or are there other aspirational projects that have been identified so far and through the ongoing process that need to be elevated into the delivery programme and monitored? But I think where we start to make the real connections with the place principle is about where do we need to make the connections between each of these projects and also the partners that are involved in delivering those things in order to achieve added value for the town. And what I'm hoping I'm hoping that the website itself, the web tool, is is where we can focus people's efforts. I always make the comparison with this online tool to the roadworks. If you're setting out on a journey, you always want to know where are the roadworks happening. Transport Scotland have a website to tell you where roadworks are happening, how long it's going to take, how much disruption it's likely to cause, who's doing the works. You get information on it. This, for me, is the land use planning equivalent, the land use planning equivalent of that tool. It's telling people not what the local development plan is hoping to achieve over a kind of 5-10 year process. It's saying what's happening now. It's a snapshot in time. It's an annual snapshot of where things are. We might be able to update it more frequently than that. So there's the vision. These are the vision drawings that I showed you before. Oh, bear with me just a second. So that's the vision drawings that you can see, that you can click on and view in a little bit more detail. Then there's the master plan itself, which is the bit that this is the main focus of our efforts. All of the content of this master plan, you'll see it's a story map format. I know we're not alone in using story map now, so there's a lot of people using it. So the content of this story map is driven by the content of the delivery program. So this, if it loads up, if my Wi-Fi cooperates, this is the table that shows you the progress of all those different projects that are under active consideration at the moment, who's delivering it, how it relates to the vision, the placemaking priorities, who's involved, if possible, how much it costs, and what the next steps are for delivery. All of that is then fed through to this master plan, which I sometimes call interactive, but it's probably not interactive as such, but you can at least get information on all the different things that are happening. There's the major employment development. You can, for all of these different projects, you can get a link to, in this case, the planning application information, and you can click on more information. Here's the Canal Marina proposal, and in all cases, you can click on, you'll see that there's information on costs there, who's leading the proposal, and it'll take you, the links will then take you to details of the scheme. So very much telling you everything you need to know about the latest status of that project. So that's how it's intended to work, and as I say, we'll be updating that on a regular basis. The final thing to really report, and I think this is where the connections to the place principle are most pronounced, are in the new ways of working that have been agreed with the Fort William 2040 project. From the consultation that was undertaken, there was a real appetite for people to work together with officers and those investing in the area, but also elected members to really help take the lead and provide a steer on what is happening. And obviously it helps that community organisations themselves are in some cases leading a number of the projects that are happening. So the Fort William 2040 report, having just been published, now acts as that joint mission statement that we're hoping, and we're hoping it it remains, it has that status on an ongoing basis. It'll be our portfolio, if you like, for what we're delivering. One really careful issue that I think that we had to contend with was about the balance between leadership and accountability. The planning system here is in some ways attempting to enable a lot of this activity and show that and try and make the connections between all of these different things. And one of the things we tried to do through the process was to give the elected members in the Lochaber area the opportunity to lead the kind of local governance arrangements for this work. But there was whilst they welcomed the opportunity to really take the bull by the horns and really steer the changes that were happening in the town, there was a slight nervousness about being seen as accountable for the delivery of all of these other projects, which and the council is not the delivery agent in a number of cases. So we've the local governance has actually been held at the officer level in what we've agreed in the end. But what elected members have agreed is quite a unique approach to the delivery on the back of the 2040 report. And this fits really well with the place principle. So officers are going to be liaising with the project leads and those involved, like the community planning partnerships, in kind of trying to coordinate and update the delivery programme. And to do so, there'll be annual events happening probably around September time, perhaps more often, and that'll be the means by which we update the delivery programme and keep that up to date on an ongoing basis. But the unique part of the ongoing engagement is that the local Lochaber committee will be inviting community representatives, at the very least community council representatives from across Lochaber, to steer, scrutinise the progress on particular projects and help that process of making connections between different things that are happening in the area. And so that's where there is a really strong connection with the place principle, because at the local and the national level, we're seeing signs that there is a willingness to coordinate investment. And Fort William is a classic case of where there are transport problems on the trunk road network, which Transport Scotland have a responsibility for. There is a major economic development and employment growth proposition for the town, which another part of Scottish Government is looking to help with. What the place principle I'm hoping will bring is coordination between all those different partners at the national level at Scottish Government, but also at the local level between community planning partners and also the land use planning system and our role in enabling and delivering. So there's a real tie-up with the work we've done and how that now is further streamlined, further coordinated through the place principle. So finally, I thought it would be useful just to finish on a few of the kind of lessons learned. On the back of the experience that I explained that we had with elected members, I would encourage anyone that is going through this process of thinking about engaging on delivery to engage with elected members as early as possible. In our case, elected members felt disengaged from certain land use decisions that were kind of under consideration. And of course, in giving them the potential means for coordinating that, as I say, there was that nervousness about accountability. So I think my headline message would be that enabling activity that we're all trying to kind of get our heads around at the moment really needs to be carefully balanced in terms of leadership versus accountability. And the way I would suggest addressing that is that discussing and agreeing as much as possible those local governance arrangements would really help to kind of make clear what everybody's role and responsibilities are. And there's a real need to ensure that people are clear at the community level and at every other level about who is expected to do what. Because as we're probably all aware, as soon as you have a consultation about something, people just simply want to know when it's going to happen, when. So when it's going to happen, where, and who by and when. So that's where the potential, the live tool, the delivery program as a live tool has that potential to manage expectations. The ongoing arrangement for engagement that we've proposed is the means by which we are proposing to tell people what's happening. And I'm hoping that we get some further positive feedback. a really good sign was after the September consultation that we had, there was some real frustration that there was not going to be any investment in the local road in the trunk road network in the next 5 years, no substantial investment anyway. But at the very least, people reported to us that they at least knew what was going on. So we took that as a sign that this ongoing engagement was really, and information sharing was really important. One thing that we're dealing with at the moment, still grappling with, is the arrangements for updating the delivery programme. We haven't got it completely nailed down yet, but just as a way of working in the planning service here, the delivery programme, reminding yourself to keep that updated, and the resource requirements of making sure that, you know, when you hear about something, when a pre-application inquiry is in, getting into the routine of actually updating the delivery programme and then publishing that on a routinely will be something that we need to make sure that becomes a staple part of our work. And to conclude, I wanted to finish with a statement that was made at the Place Principal launch a couple of weeks ago, which I attended. And I think it was a really good cue for us all, a message for us all to consider when we're thinking about engaging on delivery, and that is creating a proposition. So the suggestion was being made by one of the Scottish Government representatives that if you are to wish to work through the Place Principal way of working, applying that methodology really means approaching the Scottish Government, community planning partners, with a proposition for the place. And I think that's what Fort William has. It has a package of different things for the place that are a really effective proposition for Fort William that means people can coordinate their investment and hopefully get better value and better benefits for the community on the back of that. So hopefully that's been really useful. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Scott. I hope for everybody listening in, there are some real themes that can help there in the moving forward with local development plans. Doesn't have to always be, I mean, Fort William is an area undergoing quite a significant amount of growth, but for me, the processes that I heard would apply equally to any area that you've decided in your local development plan to focus in on, be that because it's an area of inequality and you're focusing in on it because of the links with a local outcome improvement plan, or whatever. There's principles there about recording the assets in an area, what's actively being pursued, pulling the community in to look at what all of those activities are, but also pulling in professionals that are involved in it to start that thinking about, are we linking up all of these different projects and opportunities, and then pulling it together around that vision, the master plan, and that really interesting aspect of moving on with a delivery programme that isn't only a focus for professionals to pull together around, but for communities to actually get that very important feedback loop on things. The new ways of working as well, I thought that was really interesting, and it very much lends into the Place Principle about officers liaising, but also that taking it up, it isn't just locally, it's up into nationally, and the involvement of elected members. I think I'm glad you sort of picked up that key message from that Place Principle event a few weeks ago, and that whole reasoning that there's this other bigger picture around place-based working and forming that bigger proposition to actually then take off upwards nationally and outward into other sectors and actually expand that whole Place Principle way of working as well. Trevor, have we got any questions for Scott?
Yes, we've got a first one. Scott, someone's asking, how will the engagement of young people progress through the delivery of Fort William 2040? For example, will there also be annual regular sessions with the young people who are engaged at the outset so they can see how the project they're involved with is progressing and how their input was valuable?
Yeah, inevitably, I thought it was worth mentioning the engagement with young people because it's one of the requirements that, of course, is coming through the planning bill, and I'm not sure if that's the subtext to this person's question, but we found it a really useful way of engaging with people and getting a kind of a broader range of views and perhaps more representative views of the wider community. in thinking about development plans. In this case, as I said before, we'd worked really closely with our youth engagement contacts through the kind of arm's length organisation High Life Highland, who work with young people in schools. They were really helpful for us to take some of the burden, if you like, some of the resource, the time that's required to devote to that engagement. And they actually worked with their youth groups and prepared videos and submitted them as part of the Fort William 2040 consultation. So where we also did some really interesting sessions with local primary schools and the local academy as well. So those are things that we can come back to. They've requested us to go back. And I think we would be looking at ways, at the simple level, we'd be looking at ways of continuing those direct consultations, workshops with the schools on an ongoing basis, but also looking to those people who are working with local young people in the area and across Loch Aber to give us, to help us kind of with that line of communication, because I'm conscious that it does take quite a lot of resource to commit to. And so I think you need to continue those relationships and exploit them as much as you can.
I think that's a common theme that we're finding across Scotland, is that there isn't a need always for planning to go out themselves to speak to, say, young people or areas suffering from inequality. There are already those working in local government who are out having that conversation, or working in the third sector, that you can be using that and working with them. Any other questions, Trevor?
Yes, we've got quite a few questions lined up here. Second question was, who was involved in the core project team for Fort William 2040, and how did Highland and Island Enterprise and Scottish Government provide support?
Yeah, okay. If I can take the first one about the project team, at the very simple level, that the core team was Highland Council with HIE and Scottish Government. So we were the kind of the three organisations that kind of jointly led the kind of the organising of the event and the facilitation in the end. I'm sure some of you recognised some of the familiar faces that popped up in the video. So we're particularly grateful for for that kind of partnership approach. It worked really well. HIE are one of the big priorities for HIE and the council and Scottish Government, all these partners at the moment, is the potential investment in the alloy wheel, a potential alloy wheel manufacturing facility at the existing smelter. Huge application. That's the big employment potential in the town, and there's officer groups, and there's a ministerial chaired group as well that are trying to bring about that economic development opportunity. The Fort William 2040 exercise, though, was about taking a step back and looking at the place in general and just thinking about, well, with or without a new alloy wheel factory, what is this place going to be like in the future, and how do we protect people's, how do we make the place the best we can in the future? So the proposition, if I can use that phrase again, for HIE was about how we attract inward investment, about how we keep jobs in the area, where people would be employed in the future, how we attract new investment. And from a Scottish Government point of view, that was also their concern, of course. But where we had our initial discussions with Scottish Government were around the need for coordination, and it was out of an awareness that we had separate discussions going on with Transport Scotland about the trunk road network improvements in the area, and then of course the added factor of the potential significant change in the future, as well as the existing congestion issues. We had other parts of Scottish Government involved, and I suppose there was the call to action, I suppose, and the reason that we all became involved was the opportunity to coordinate that a lot more clearly and try and make sense of it all in a kind of a more coherent process and align it to the local development plan. Has that answered the question? Hopefully that's answered the question.
Yeah, we've got plenty more here, Scott, as well.
Okay.
Next question is, Is the Fort William 2040 project a template for local place planning?
It's funny you should ask that, because when we presented this to one of our, I think it was either our strategic planning committee or it was the community partnership, the community planning partnership board. The leader of our council stood up and said, actually, this is great. Actually, you should be doing this in every single community. At which point I kind of thought, oh, goodness, that, is that really what we want? To actually replicate this approach would be quite significant. I think local place planning is interesting because I think we need a proportionate response to the scale of change that is happening in each of the places. So the direct answer to the question is yes, because here we've come up with a template that responds to a potentially significant scale of growth for that place. I think local place plans, in the way that they are coming forward, they do have their place as long as they are integrated and compatible and complement the local development framework, and potentially provide a steer for future development planning as well. But I think there needs to be really strong kind of complementarity between what is happening through local place plans and the local development plan. Here you've got an example of a template for delivering together, and I suppose that could be translated to the local place plan level, whereby people are delivering together, irrespective of what plan stuff is identified in. You've got a process by which you can monitor and identify change and communicate change, irrespective of where things originate from.
Okay, we also have a couple of questions on the methodology. Methodology implies a series of steps. Someone was asking if you could go through them.
The methodology for, is it clear whether they're asking about the process for preparation, or is it the delivery, the ongoing engagement?
I think it will be on ongoing engagement, Scott. If the person who asked the question can just can elaborate for me, please.
If I start by going back to the new ways of working slide to answer part of that question anyway, I suppose this best explains the kind of the methodology, the numbered items there. What we're intending to do is just use the report, the Fort William 2040 report, which is part of the wider delivery program, action program, delivery program, call it what you will, for our wider local development plans. So it's initiating a process whereby we work on an annual basis with communities. We talk to people who are leading the projects. We then have an annual engagement event where people can come in and find out about what's happening, being sure to show that who's in charge of all these different things. So again, we're enabling, not managing, if you like, and then taking that to the local committee, who can then work with those community council representatives to more closely scrutinise where things are happening. The local governance arrangements that we've agreed with at the officer level will be that our director, Stuart Black, will be chairing a kind of an officer group who can take the lead on kind of the monitoring arrangements. And I suppose that's where that other slide becomes useful, because it tells you the kind of, I guess, our process for monitoring is what's outlined here, and I guess that's where we start to see whether there's the true measure of success, whereby people, the success will be measured by how well people feel engaged on an ongoing basis, and then how well we feel that we're coordinating to actually bring about some of these changes, and how well those changes fit with that wider vision.
Can I ask?
Not sure if I've answered the question.
When you say about chairing an officer group, what kind of different services would be represented on that, or have you got that far?
Yeah, so internally we're going to have a group of officers who are really the people, the asset owners is probably the best description. So we would be hoping to have so Transport Scotland as the asset owner for the trunk road network, our local transport and transport planning contacts, education, those who are involved in working with RSLs on housing delivery, affordable housing agencies on housing delivery, and also working with the likes of community planning partners as well.
Mm-hmm.
In Fort William, there is a new hospital proposed. That's one of the kind of catalysts for change. There is a new so-called, the STEM Centre for education point of view. The college are looking to also kind of modernise the way they do things as well with this growth agenda. So it'll be about engaging with all those different people. Part of that will happen through the local officer group in the council and other with partners, but part of it will also need to happen in terms with liaison directly with other agencies as well.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions relating to the LDP. First is, how do you see this integrating with the next iteration of the LDP? And kind of expanding on that, will there be other similar projects for other LDPs in the Highland area?
Yeah, okay. In terms of integration with the local development plan first, it's worth pointing out that the examination report for our emerging plan is expected, as it happens, today or tomorrow. So that was another reason for trying to make sure that we were avoiding anything that would undermine any of the content of the emerging report, and the emerging plan, which was of course subject to final view by the reporters. An example of that is the major kind of corporate port proposals that are one of the major projects in there. There's a question mark over that, and we've been quite transparent about that in the delivery programme, whereby that might not. We're quite optimistic, but that might not make it through the examination process, and we don't think that's going to happen. But we obviously need to wait and see what happens. So the answer to the question about integration with the LDP is that we'll need to see what comes from the examination report. The adopted plan will then have to complement and be complemented by the delivery programme. So there's a direct relationship between those two things that will be updated on an ongoing basis. So I suppose I think it will ultimately inform future plan reviews, because if this way of working continues in the way we intend it to, you'll be much better engaged with what's happening with change in a particular area, and therefore much better equipped to respond and be flexible to the changes that are required for a future local development plan. I'd be hoping that review would be in perhaps 9 years, 8 to 9 years time, as opposed to 2 to 3 years from now. Sorry, there was a second part to the question as well.
I think you've sort of answered the second part. The second part was just looking at how it worked with how other projects would fit in with other Highland LDPs.
And was it? I think it was about also whether we would do it elsewhere. Is that right?
I think that's the gist of the question.
Yeah. I suppose I'd go back to my earlier comment about taking a proportionate response. Where we see that there's such major changes as this, I think we would look to find a similar way of working. As the first attempt to do this, it probably has taken more officer time than we would like for the future. But certainly it's definitely given us a way of working that can be replicated in other places. We just need to make sure that the effort that goes into the delivery programme it is useful for ongoing review, and is proportionate and can be managed with the resources we've got.
Okay, we've got a question asking what the involvement was of the private sector in the process and with the ongoing delivery programme as well.
Yeah. What I'm hoping we've achieved through carrying out that engagement in September is that there's a much closer relationship and understanding between what the intentions of those who are involved in delivering change, if you like, what their intentions are and when they intend to do it. I've talked about the delivery programme as a means of communicating that, so I probably don't need to say anything more about that. But certainly, if we're to, it's essential that we keep those private sector stakeholders involved in this process on an ongoing basis, because allowing them to see eye to eye with the community representatives, allowing them to have a face-to-face conversation is actually quite refreshing for the communities, and I think that's quite a subtle thing, but it made a big difference, and it was the element where we got a lot of positive feedback from community representatives. They welcomed the fact that they were having that conversation with people who are involved in delivering things directly. So I think our call to the private sector is to be more open and to be less guarded, perhaps, about their intentions. We hope they see the benefits in being open and transparent about things that they intend to do, and that whilst there is always going to be a need for commercial confidentiality on certain elements, I think that hopefully we've exposed the benefits of working together and working more transparently.
Where you were saying you would have a kind of annual catch-up with community representatives, have you had any thoughts about having the private sector there as well to keep that face-to-face communication up?
Yeah, so we'll be having an internal meeting with the project leads through those local governance arrangements that I mentioned. So we'll be bringing them together in an invited meeting, so that they feel very much like they're bought into something, that they have a duty to kind of cooperate with us on that, and we'll be asking them, as closely as possible, instructing them to be at that workshop, that exhibition workshop that we hold on an annual basis, to be the face and to provide those updates to people on their project and how it's being delivered and what progress is being made, and that will help to manage people's expectations, help to avoid the council being seen as responsible for all of this change, and hopefully it helps and it represents that kind of enabling activity.
Okay, we have a question here on how you're approaching any proposals where land ownership might be an issue, or where it wasn't in your control at all.
I'm not sure we've come across any particular areas where land ownership has been an issue so far. We have a housing and regeneration kind of manager in the council who has been very proactive in some cases acquiring land to deliver much of the housing and the infrastructure. By infrastructure, I mean the hospital, the other things that are going to be brought forward in the town. Much of that land has been subject of acquisition by kind of public sector partners in order to enable that to happen and for us to provide that steer. I suppose in the scenario that we have a land ownership issue, I suppose we would just be looking to kind of flush that out as much as possible in advance of any engagement that we have. Again, and picking up that element, that issue of transparency.
Got some technical questions. One, just looking at the story mapping software, other authorities are looking to see what you've used and its affordability.
Yeah, we've got, I think a number of the councils around the country will have a contract already with Esri, and the story mapping feature forms part of the contract that we have with them. So from a value point of view, it's absolutely fantastic as far as I'm concerned. And I would encourage, if I could do a shameless plug, I would encourage those folks to look at our the monitoring, auditing works that we've carried out recently. So our housing land audit, our business and industrial land audit, and also our town centre health checks have recently been published through the story map method. And it is a really, really user-friendly way of being able to get access to information. Where it doesn't integrate at the moment, which is perhaps something for the digital planning area to consider in Scottish Government, is it doesn't necessarily integrate with Uniform or with we use the Keystone Objective software for our development plans consultations. And obviously neither of those three things can very easily talk to each other at the moment, although we are looking at, we have used story mapping for consultations, but but you have to just simply provide a link remotely to the tool. They don't integrate with each other as closely as we would like. But yeah, the story maps are fantastic. We're not alone in using it. There's a number of different people across the country that have used it, and there's some really good examples. But yeah, have a look at our audits recently, which hopefully are a useful template. And if you've got any questions, by all means, you can get in touch with us on our dev plans email address.
Okay, I think given our time, Trevor, just one very quick question.
Yep, just a last one on the delivery programme. Someone's asking if it's accessible for others to update, or is this coordinated purely through the planning department?
It's coordinated by us. We haven't provided any means by which people can provide updates. What we've said is we'll manage the updates to the delivery programme and coordinate that as part of the delivery programme for all of our local development plans. We're bringing it together to a single delivery programme. My long-term aim is to have it all in a single story map, so people can see any activity that's happening. People can go in and see any change that's happening, whether it be housing development or trunk road improvements or whatever. So we'll manage that. We do need to be careful about the resource requirements for that, but I think if we were to open it up, I can't see any way of easily opening it up. It would be quite attractive to think of a reporting tool, but at the moment, I think to manage it, to keep it as easy as possible, we've kept it in-house. And on at least an annual basis, possibly 6 monthly, we'll publish the action programme update as a kind of snapshot, so that we can call it as much as possible a kind of live delivery programme.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. That's us coming to our full hour. So just many thanks to you for your time and presenting this, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. This whole session has been recorded, and we will have it up on the planning skills page, but we will also be putting it up on the Partners in Planning website. So that is partnersinplanning.scot, where we're building a resource with a lot of other organisations, so that there's a kind of one-stop shop for planning information, knowledge, behavioural change, everything around that aspect of our review to planning that doesn't come from legislation. With that, I'll just thank you again, and we'll close up, and everybody have a happy Easter. Thank you.
Thank you.